All right. Awesome. So thank you guys for coming today. What Jeremy and I had discussed doing is getting into some feedback about the quizzes. I thank everybody for getting that in. I know that it was something that's a little bit strange to do, right? Yes, there is some right and wrongs based upon what we're trying to build at Vale, but overall, we also want everybody to have their own opinion of how to do certain things. So we're going to take today and think about first culture, 10 minutes, right? And really culture when it comes to us as coaches, us in a training environment, and then 15 to 20 minutes to go through the 7Fs, to go through the decision-making process, and to go through the coach's toolbox, all right? If you guys have questions today, please do not hesitate to just raise your hands, and we'll stop and talk through it, right? So I'm very happy to do that in the flow, in the context of what we have going on. All right, so just a reiteration first, right? Culture, purposeful, evolving, living, breathing. When I think of culture, it is the single most important thing that leads to people wanting to be around us, right? Players wanting to be around us, coaches wanting to be around us wanting to be around each other. And that happens on all levels. It happens laterally, it happens up and down, it happens down to up, and it happens in a team setting as well, right? And so each of you will get to create your own team culture. But I want to talk a little bit about the culture that we're trying to create overall at Vale, so you can bring that into what you guys do. So our 4 core values that we discussed and that we'll continue to discuss are we over me, do what's right, love for life and sport, and always try your best. The impetus on always try your best is that we can always improve, we can always get better. And that if you have the feeling of, I'm going to do this to the best of my ability, even if there is a failure there, there's learning that comes from that should be okay in that moment. Oftentimes, I think we second guess whether or not we actually did our best. And it isn't until that moment of reflection that we actually can be honest with ourselves about always trying your best and what that means. So, all right. So here we go. Technician, tactician, or coach? Which one are you? When I first started coaching, I was very, very much a technician. I would work on technical repetition. I would work on them and the ball, pairs in the ball. And I really felt like it was my job to improve them technically. Then from there, I thought that I was Bielsa and everything that I could do to influence and impact the game, right? So that was my progression from technician to tactician. And I'm not all the way there, guys, on any of these things, and then the progression to coach. When I think of a coach, I think about the soft skills of understanding what they need, when they need it, how they need it. And I think about that from a holistic approach to what they may have going on, being empathetic to the situation and or asking them, right, and having conversation with them and building dialogue with them about how I can support them better. And so you guys should self-reflect a little bit on where you are in your coaching evolution and what that means. That does not mean that a coach is not a tactician, and that does not mean that a coach is not a technician. But I think especially for a lot of the younger coaches on here, right, you would probably point out the technical frailties and failures of a player first. And then you would start diagnosing and getting into the tactical failures, right? Not recognizing what the outside influence may do for these players. And so now when I think about what I would like from you guys and what I'd like from a Vale coach to be is a coach more than anything else. And you have the other aspects of it, right? The saying that I use all the time is they don't care how much you know until they know how much you care, right? The knowledge that we all have for this game is great and it's growing every day. None of that stuff really matters. Jeremy shared a Dave Clark quote from yesterday where they were having a conversation and Dave Clark said, you know how I'm going to beat you? I'm going to get better players than you. In the youth game, right? In the youth game, we can make those players better and do everything that we can. But what it comes down to at the end of the day is if they have 3 to 5 players that are better than your 3 to 5 best players, it's likely that they're going to have the upper hand in that game. Okay. And so I think that that is some important things to recognize. All right. So what drives winning? So next, I just want to watch this short clip on what drives winning. Oh, it's not going to let me do it without stopping the share. Hold on. Sorry, guys. And then I go here. I got to reshare a different screen. Okay. See if you guys can watch this.
Coach is Mike Krzyzewski.
Can you guys see this?
And before he did with the Olympic team, I asked him, what's the power of questions? What have you come to learn about that? Here's what he said.
It produces discussion. It gives them ownership, or it gives them a chance. If you tell them the answer before you ask the question, it may only be your answer. If you ask the question, they answer the way you want to, or you can figure it out how that is, then the answer is both of yours. And so you all have ownership over that answer.
You've come to understand the power of questions.
I love it. I mean, that engagement, we're such tellers as educators, as teachers, as coaches. We want to tell them what to do. And the other thing that can happen is we don't want to ask questions because it slows the process down, and I need to get on to cover a lot of things. But the really smart ones will ask a question that doesn't slow the group down, that they can answer it, that they know that student or that athlete, and so they can move it along, but now they've created this ownership.
And I'd like to show you an example of that at the highest level. So when Coach K took over, it was right after the worst finish in USA basketball history. Their record was 5-3. They took 3rd place. And I asked Coach K, what's the most important team building exercise you did with that crew? And here's what he said.
Probably the most important one I've had was the night before we started practice with the Olympic team, the 2008 gold medal team in Beijing, where we never talked about basketball. We talked about standards. And these are things that Kobe Bryant, Jason Kidd, LeBron James, Dwayne Wade, and all these guys said. It was about how we were going to live. And everybody on the team contributed, and we came up with 15 standards.
So, again, that was a brief, let's see if this is all going to work. Perfect. That was a brief synopsis for me that I think leads to a really valuable point. We are facilitators of their game. It's their game, right? At the end of the day, when I think about the culture that we want to create at Vale, we want to use questions. We want to help them to get their own bug for this game, right? Billy trains right now with Danny Griffin at Vale 5 days a week. That kid absolutely has the bug. He is at home reading about the mentality stuff. He is at home thinking about how he can get better and what those different things need. The game is his. Billy's facilitating and helping him with certain things. I'm facilitating and helping him with certain things through the kinds of questions that I am asking him. And so as a coach, when we continue to think about our growth trajectories, think about how we're using questions in order to help the players, okay? That becomes a really important thing. All right, so what's important in our culture from our coaches? I got about another 2 minutes before we get over to Jeremy. So curiosity. For you guys as the coaching staff, for me included, I want you to be always curious about your improvement, curious about your weaknesses, curious how you continue to expand upon your strengths. Curiosity is a really, really important skill in life, especially when it comes to improvement, right? And if you guys want to continue to improve and to continue to think about that game and the game that we all love, that curiosity about how you do it differently and how you improve it. Energy, right? We talk about the 9 clap. It's not 3 claps, but it's 9 claps, right? It's nice and loud. It's energetic. It helps share your passion. It's not all the time. You pick your moments, But if you can find the ways to share your passion with the players and the environment that you're creating, that's going to be always a very exciting thing for them. Catch them being good. Also inside of that, what drives winning, and I've heard it many times, and Tony DeCicco was a huge, huge advocate of always catching them being good. I believe wholeheartedly that when I pick out a player doing something right over the top in front of their peers, it hits home in a really big way. Maybe the only thing that's bigger than that is if a star player on their team catches them being good as well. But when the coach does it, that's something that's exceptional. All right. And so catch them being good. Soft skills. This is what we talked about, right? The empathy that goes with the coaching. All right. Teaching the skill of communication. It's probably the single most important thing that we will do in our life is to learn how to properly communicate with a bunch of different people. And so for our players to communicate the positives and the negatives, not just catching people when they're doing well, but for a player to catch a teammate that's not accountable to the team and find out the way to have that hard conversation and learn from that is a really important skill. And then the growth mindset, right? Like the growth mindset for me within our coaching staff is why I've moved forward with having you guys in our organization and want to continue to do that. And that's why you guys are on here today. So that becomes a really important one. Then when we talk about the culture from our players, right? I think about curiosity as well. I think I was talking to Sarah, somebody I was talking to the other day. We have so many players that at their ages and within sport right now, they see failure and they fear it. They're not willing to learn from it. If we can change them to understand and want to be curious about trial and error, right? A scientist learns by getting things wrong in the lab. They test and they get it wrong and they make a minor change, and they test and get it wrong and make a minor change. All right. Energy. Again, how do the players share energy? How do they recognize when the team is down and lift each other up? How can they catch their teammates being good? How can they understand the accountability for their actions? How can they understand the accountability for the team's actions? And what do all of those things mean? And then lastly, we talk about the communication again, right? That skill that we can teach them, not being afraid of the hard conversations and saying nothing rather than saying something when it comes to their interaction with you, when it comes to their interaction with their teammates, when it comes to their interaction with their teachers. All of those things are really important things that we want for our players. And that inside of our culture, we need to think about developing that. And then lastly, you guys can't see it that well, but it says failure as a learning experience to grow from rather than as a failure to just move on from. Okay.